My name is Michael Isikoff. I'm the chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News, and I was recently in Damascus and interviewed President Assad and confronted him with some of the photos you saw in this film. I want to start out by just introducing Tawfiq al-Alaq, who is the brother of Mariam, who you saw in the film, who lost her son, Ayam. He is, and he is here on behalf of his family. So,
I am Tawfiq al-Alaq. My sister is Mariam. I talk with Arabic now because I'm learning English now. I'm sorry. Mr.
My name is Qutayba Ilbi, and I'll be translating for Mr. Tawfiq.
أنا سأنوب عن أختي الآن بالكلام عوضاً عنها بدل عنها.
I'm talking here in behalf of my sister.
هي بعثت لكم رسالة.
She sends you a message that I'm going to read.
هي كانت تتمنى تكون معكم.
She wishes to be with you here.
لكن ما قدرت تحصل على فيزا للأسف.
But she was not able to get a visa to come here.
بتقولكم.
She says,
مشاركتي في هذا الفيلم.
My participation in this film
هي رسالة من كل أم سورية.
is a message from every Syrian mother
استشهد ابنها في المعتقل.
that lost her son in prison
ولم تستطع الحصول على جثمانه.
and was not able to get his body
ولم تستطع أن تدفنه.
and was not able to bury him
أو أن تزوره في قبره.
or to visit his grave.
لكن النساء أمهات شهداء
But those women
لا يستطعن الكلام في هذا الموضوع
cannot talk about this subject
من الخوف والرعب من النظام
because of their fear of their Syrian regime.
خلال سنة ونص
In a year and a half,
شفت مئات الأمهات
I saw hundreds of women
من أمثالي
like me
كانوا بس عم يبحثوا عن يشوفوا جثة أولاده.
who were just seeking to see the body of their sons.
كانوا بس بدهم يتأكدوا إنه ابنهم مات ولا ما مات.
They just wanted to know if their sons are dead or not.
بعد حوالي شهرين من بداية الثورة عام 2011
2 months after the beginning of the revolution in 2011,
نحن كنا ساكنين في مدينة اسمها حرستا قريب من دمشق.
we used to live in Harasta, which is a suburb close to Damascus, the capital.
كانت الطائرات عم تقصف البيوت من فوق.
The airplanes were bombing from the sky.
والمدرعات أيضا عم تقصف البيوت والناس أيضا المتظاهرين.
And tanks or armors on the ground were bombing both houses and demonstrators.
وكان لابد إنه نترك بيتنا.
So we had no choice but to leave.
أولادي كان عندهم بيوت أيضا تركوها.
My kids also had to leave there.
اللي هن يعني جمعنا مالها من عرق السنين طويلة.
We had to leave those houses which we spent years to afford it.
تركنا كل شيء وذهبنا لعند أختي بدمشق.
We left everything and we went to my sister's place in Damascus.
أخي تعرض للاغتيال فسافر. اللي هو أنا.
My brother had an assassination attempt, so he had to leave, which is me.
ترك بيته في دمشق.
He left his house in Damascus,
فسكننا في بيته.
so we lived in his house.
أنا وأولادي وزوجاتهم وأحفادي.
Me, my sons and their wives and their families.
وأيضا عندي أخت تانية ساكنة قريب من دمشق.
My other sister who also lived close to Damascus.
قصف بيتها أيضا.
Her house was bombed too.
هي لا تتدخل بالسياسة على الإطلاق.
Even though she was not involved in politics at all.
وانضمت إلنا في بيت أخي.
So she also joined us at that house.
صرنا في البيت حوالي 20 شخص.
We were about 20 people in that house.
وشعرنا لأول مرة بشيء من الأمان.
And for the first time, we felt some kind of safety.
لكن فجأة إجا الأمن وطردنا من البيت كلياتنا على الشارع.
But one day, the intelligence came to the house and kicked us all out.
في ثيابنا ما سمحونا ناخذ أي شيء معنا.
We were just out with our clothes. They didn't allow us to take anything.
كانوا مصوبين الأسلحة لصدورنا.
And they were pointing their guns at us.
عندي أخ اسمه محمود.
I have a brother, his name is Mahmoud.
كان لا يجرؤ أن يقترب من البيت اللي أنا ساكنة فيه.
He wouldn't dare even to come close to where I live.
لأنه البيت كان مراقب من الأمن.
Because intelligence were watching us all the time.
بعد وفاة ابني
After my son was killed, Ayham,
أقمنا عزاء في بيت أخي.
we had his funeral and service at my brother's house.
معظم أقربائنا ما أتوا للعزاء.
Most of our family and relatives did not come.
وكذلك كل أصدقائنا.
And so is all of our friends.
كل واحد كان يجي على البيت كان وكأنه يقدم روحه يعني كأنه يضحي بروحه.
Coming to his service was as of sacrificing their lives.
وقت عرفوا بضيعتنا اللي نحن أصلنا منها اسمها دير عطية.
In our village, Deir Atiyah, when people knew about what happened with us,
فكان لازم يخبروا إنه في شخص توفى كالعادة.
usually what happens in those communities is that people would tell each other that someone died.
وهذا يحدث إنه بوقفوا بمأذنة الجامع وبيقولوا فلان الفلاني مات.
And that usually happens that someone would come up to the minaret of the mosque and they would announce that someone from, originally from that village has died.
المؤذن لم يجرؤ أن يقول إنه ابني مات شهيد.
But no one had the courage to come up and say that my son died as a martyr.
قال إنه مات فقط.
He said that he just died.
حتى معظم أهل قريتنا
Even most of the people in our village
ابتعدوا عنا. يعني بعدوا ما عادوا يحكوا معنا.
They wouldn't even talk with that guy who went to the minaret and announced it.
كل ذلك من خوف من الأمن والاعتقال والتعذيب.
All because they were afraid of being detained, of being tortured, of being killed by the government.
بعد ما طردونا من بيتنا رحنا على لبنان.
After being kicked out of the house, we went to Lebanon.
وهناك قدمنا طلبات جميعا لمفوضية اللاجئين.
And that's where we all applied for resettlement through the UN Refugee Agency.
رفض طلبي.
My application was denied.
رفض طلب ابني الكبير.
And so is my oldest son.
الصغير ركب بالبحر.
My youngest son took the boats in the sea.
من تركيا باتجاه اليونان.
From Turkey to Greece.
في قوارب الموت.
Through the death boats.
والحمد لله وصل بالسلام.
And he made it safely, thank God.
وبعد سنة ونص.
A year and a half later.
التحقوا في أسرته.
His family joined him.
ابني الثاني.
My other son.
ذهب إلى نيوزيلندا.
He went to New Zealand.
هو وأسرته.
With his family.
بقيت أنا وحدي في لبنان.
And I stayed in Lebanon by myself.
ولسه لحد الآن في لبنان.
And I'm still there by myself.
الآن أنا عايشة مع أختي بلبنان.
I live with my sister now.
ما بستطيع إطلاقاً العودة لسوريا.
And I can never return to Syria.
لأني مطلوبة من الأمن أيضاً.
Because I'm wanted by the security service in Syria.
لكن أنا قررت إني أحط كل حياتي وكل عمري الباقي مشان أدافع عن المعتقلين الآن في سجون الأسد.
But I decided to use every moment left in my life to defend those left in Assad's prisons.
بشكر الناس اللي عملوا الفيلم.
I thank everyone who worked on that film.
كل واحد فيهم بشكره من قلبي ومن أعماقي.
Every single one of them from the bottom of my heart.
لأنه وصلوا صوتي وصوت الأمهات.
Because they were able to deliver my voice and the voices of the other mothers.
وصوت المعتقلين.
and the voice of those detained.
وبيبقى انه طالب واتمنى من كل واحد فيكم قادر على انه يوصل صوتنا للمحاكم الدولية.
And I wish of every one of you who can deliver our voice to international platforms to do so.
انه يحاول.
And to try.
الأذى اللي لحق أيهم
What happened to Ayham?
هو أذى لكل واحد فيكم.
What happened to Ayham didn't only happen to him, it happened to every one of you.
لكل إنسان على وجه الأرض.
And to all humans on earth.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much.
Well, we have an excellent panel here to discuss this very powerful film. To my left, Ambassador Rapp, who you saw in the film. He is the former U.S. Ambassador at Large for War Crimes Issues, and the Sonia and Harry Blumenthal Distinguished Fellow for the Prevention of Genocide at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Qutaiba Idlibi is from Damascus, Syria. He was detained and tortured twice by the Assad regime, including at Air Force Intelligence at Meza Airport, and was forced to leave the country. He's currently a researcher at the Global Policy Institute working on policy and advanced education in the Middle East. Sarah Afshar is a journalist and filmmaker and who made this movie. She is her last film, The Killing of Farkunda, was nominated for a Royal Television Society Award in the UK for Best International Current Affairs Documentary. And Mahmoud Nouara is a writer and journalist from Damascus. He was arrested in Syria in 2013 and detained and tortured at the regime's notorious Palestine Security Branch for 3 months. Sarah, let me start with you. Tell us how you came to make this film.
Well, I first saw the Caesar photographs in January 2014 when they first came out. And when I saw them, I thought, this is going to make a huge impact. I was so shocked by the photographs. And of course, I first thought, well, why would they photograph these things? Are these photographs real? And I found out that they were real. And I thought, everyone would be talking about this because it's such strong evidence of mass atrocities. But it was actually at the time then when ISIS came to the fore in the conflict in Syria. And, you know, as a filmmaker, I was being asked to make films about ISIS. And of course, people should make films about ISIS. But months passed, and by the autumn of 2014, when I felt that not enough was being done about these photographs, I decided to start investigating it myself. And then subsequently, my colleague Nicola Kutcher joined me in that work, which, you know, has taken us a year and a half to do. But really, you know, our aim was to bring this story to the fore. And, you know, in the UK, where it's been shown, we've got so many messages from people who said, I'd never seen the photographs, I didn't know these things were happening in detention, and yeah, so we wanted to spread that awareness.
Yeah, it is astonishing that these photographs have been publicly available for a few years now, and yet so few people know about them, have seen them, understand their significance, despite the fact that the images are so haunting and seem to be so reminiscent of the images we've seen from Nazi concentration camps that are in this museum. If there was one takeaway you wanted people to have from this film, what would it be?
that it's really important to bear witness to these crimes, that we mustn't turn away, that's really important for the survivors and for the families. And, sorry, it's more than one takeaway. I want people to get active about this and be, you know, as outraged as I am. And, you know, we need to do something about it. We need independent monitors to go into these detention facilities. I want people to contact their politicians and put pressure on this and to talk about this issue, because this is a hidden humanitarian crisis. I mean, that's another reason why Nicola and I wanted to make this film, because obviously you see so much coverage of Syria and it's what's happening on the battlefield, but this is the hidden thing, and these people mustn't be forgotten. And they're there now, right now, while we're having this discussion. They're there, and we have to try to get them out.
Qutaiba, you were in one of the Syrian regime prisons at Mezeh Airport, which is featured in this film. Tell us what it was like being in that prison and what you experienced.
I mean, it's really hard to describe really how things are in there. The simplest word I can use is just inhuman. People always ask me, what do you wish for the people who tortured you inside? And I tell them, even for Assad himself, I don't wish for him to be in there, because there's no human being that deserves to be in Mezeh Military Airport or Hospital 601 or Tishreen Hospital or any of those facilities. The problem with, I mean, when we always think about torture, we think about it in the maybe the simplest, the saddest way. But even what happens in those facilities is much more than what we even heard in the film. For Assad, I mean, torture inside is not just a tool. It's what the system is built on. When I was first taken in, there was a process that starts. They call the reception, basically. So basically, anyone who's detained, the soldiers or the security officers would gather around him and beat him. What Mazen described as jumping over and doing all of that. They do that for hours, basically. But before they do that, a doctor would come in and would examine the muscles in my body, basically to decide which level of torture they should start with. So they would not be wasting time on things, basically, that my body
can I ask, what were they torturing you for? Had you participated in the Arab Spring demonstrations of 2011?
Yeah.
Is that why you got picked up and detained?
They were actually, no. In the most notorious time when I was first detained in the Mezeh military airport, they were torturing me because they didn't know what I was doing in a besieged area that they were, the army that was sieging. And they just wanted to know how, as I'm I was the first from Damascus to be detained, so they wanted to know, what is this kid from Damascus doing in this area? So I was just tortured because they didn't actually know what I was,
But what did they want from you? Did they want a confession? Did they want information? What were they seeking?
Yeah, they just wanted to know what I was doing there, or if I have any activity or not, without even having a single clue. Even later, I was released from Mezeh military airport, and their assumption is I had nothing to do because I didn't confess to anything under torture, so basically I had nothing to do with it. But for them, it's oh, we have to do that process just to make sure. So in case, even if I have anything I have hidden, so it's they tortured me enough to punish me so I would not do it again.
Mahmoud, you were in Palestine Security Branch. Tell us how you came to be there and what your experience was.
First, hello everybody, and thank you for being here to see this tough movie. I also would like to thank Sarah and all the participants in this movie because it delivers our message. We need materials like this. We need more and more. So thank you again, Sarah. If I would like to speak about Palestine security branch, if I would like to describe it in just one word, I'll say it's the hell. I can tell you a small part of the story. I was in a bar with some friends, have some drinks. Then, like 16 ghosts with AK-47, 16 with that machines, just for me. So, of course, when they came and asked for my name specifically, I knew it will be so difficult. And the fact that was my dad was a political prisoner in the same prisons of this regime since 70s, so I knew a lot. Of course, everything in the time after the war got much, much more worse. Anyway, they took me for that place. I will not describe a lot, but I would like, and you know, these people became artists with torturing. I would not like to speak. You can imagine, you can imagine the worst thing. Any human can do it for anybody. This is the torture mechanics, dynamics, and actually, they are really artists. Anyway, I would like to speak a little bit about the cells. All of us speak about, the torture and how it is difficult. Of course, it's terrible. But the thing not many people know about, that the cells by itself is torture. How? Imagine with me like a cell 8 meters by 4 meters, 120 men. 120 men. Under the ground, like 2 layers under the ground, with all of these open wounds, you saw, without fresh air, without sun, with that skin illness called scabies. Even the water has a texture and smell. And we drink from the same sink we clean ourselves from. There is one toilet for 120 sick men. The lights stay open all the day. We are stuck together, so you can't lay down, you can't lie, you can't, and there is a man beside you, to the right, to your right, to your left, and you can imagine what does that mean with all of these open wounds. So many people, of course, many people die directly from the torture. But a lot of the people also dies there. Because there, it's by itself, it's just torturing. It's important to know that it's not just, I think also all of this is kind of policy to break us more, to destroy us more.
To what end?
What?
To what end? For what purpose?
When you break somebody, you can't take any confession you want from him. So easy. So I remembered many people died just in front of me in this cells. Kid, old man. I would like just to say last thing about this. You saw all of these bodies? All of us were like these bodies. The only difference that we are the lucky. but their hearts stopped beating. We are just lucky that we are here.
Ambassador, you have been dedicated for some years to trying to bring a criminal case against the Assad regime. You say in the film that the evidence is overwhelming, it's a slam dunk. Explain why you say that.
Well, and I'm referring specifically to the detention system, because you have a system that the state runs itself. You have the material that we have from Caesar, a military police officer. You saw those numbers, like the 320 that was on IM. You also saw in Arabic 215, the prison where he was killed. In the Caesar photos, we know exactly the day in which his fresh corpse was photographed at a military hospital, Meza hospital. And so you have something that's actually done by the regime. Many times in war crimes, I prosecuted the Rwanda genocide. You have irregulars, militias, Interahamwe, and others that are out there committing the crime. This is the system itself. Then, of course, you've got the evidence that CIJA has developed. Bill Wiley was presenting the documents from inside the government itself, showing what was, why it did it, how it did it, who it was aiming for. And so it's really a rather seamless case. Even cases of poison gas are not as easy as this one, frankly, because you've got to have the analysis at the scene, you've got to know who dropped the bomb, you have to have a variety of other information. Bombardments like Aleppo, were they aiming at ISIS or were they aiming at civilians? All of those things require a lot of proof. Here, the proof is already there, and it leads to the pinnacle. It leads to the top man in all of these structures, who is indeed President Assad. But it also leads to these people just below him that we've charged in the Spanish case.
But there are huge obstacles to bringing this to the Court of International Justice. And just to take a step back, huge obstacles to influencing what goes on inside Syria at all. You were part of an administration, the Obama administration, some of whose officials could be quite eloquent about the abuses of the Assad regime. Samantha Power, certainly at the United Nations. But when it came to policy, the president made it clear that Syria did not involve core national security interests. We were not going to invest too much, certainly in U.S. blood and treasure, in trying to remove this regime that's committing these acts. How do you explain that, and how do you deal with that view that however horrific these atrocities may be, there's very little the international community can do about it?
Well, I mean, certainly there have been other situations where we've had horrendous crimes committed and where eventually it was possible to hold the perpetrators to account. I mean, you deal with two aspects of administration policy. I understand mine was dealing with documenting these crimes, building the cases, doing everything we could to find an avenue for justice. I'm not the person in charge of airstrikes. I think, many of my colleagues, and frankly outside the administration, I believed we should have done more to make Assad pay a price for
Such
crimes
as what?
that he was committed. No, I mean the idea of taking action to establish safe areas, those kinds of ideas at the time, which would have been difficult. We would have had to be engaged. We would have had to maintain a presence, certainly in terms of in the area, to prevent these areas from becoming sites of terrorism. It would have involved the United States becoming more engaged. We know the problems of Iraq. We know how we could become the issue. The president and his advisors had very strong arguments about not getting involved and becoming the issue. And obviously those were contentious debates within our government. But when it came to the fundamental issue of, is there going to be justice? I mean, we pressed for the International Commission of Inquiry. We supported this idea, rolled it out in April of 2012 of supporting documentation efforts like those that led to CIJA. The U.S. In the last days of the Obama administration supporting a mechanism at the United Nations to create a documentation effort to really build cases for prosecution and to work with national prosecutors. The sort of justice effort, that kind of aspect of it, is something that we've supported and the rest of the world has largely supported, but it's been blocked in terms of trying to take it to an international court by Russia and China vetoing. The United States supported a resolution in May of 2014 to take it to the ICC. We got 13 votes. We campaigned, got African countries, South American countries, everybody to vote for it. China and Russia vote no. It's 13-2. We lose because it's a veto.
So that's
and
it.
so
We're blocked.
we can't get there right now, but we can find other ways. And that's certainly what I've been working on before I left the administration, and now even more intensively afterwards, as you saw in the film.
Sarah, given the obstacles that the ambassador just explained, you say you want to sort of mobilize international outrage about what's going on, yet translate that into practical steps that people can take, that the civilized world can take to do something about what you're showing in this film.
Well, individuals, ordinary people, the first thing is that I think that just them being informed about it and knowing about it and talking about it is a first step. I at least want to start to achieve that. What Ambassador Rapp was talking about is also important. This Spanish case, and there are also cases coming in Germany, are important because, it signals that there won't be impunity, that there are, ways forward. And that can have an impact on the way people behave inside Syria now. If they see, if international arrest warrants are issued, which is a possibility with the Spanish judge, then that could have an impact on, the people who work inside these facilities and are a part of that system. If you start seeing that some kind of a net is closing in. But I also, yes, I do believe in the power of people, again, I say to talk to their own politicians in their own countries, so that it suddenly becomes an issue that is on the radar and that is important. Obviously, Russia is really important. Russia could influence the regime. And, if we look at a situation where the regime was influenced, it was in 2013 when the threat of force was on the table, and after the first chemical attack, and the Russians then stepped in, and that deal was brokered, whereby the regime, handed most of its stockpile. And obviously, that was at that time that was, hailed some kind of success, that at least, most of their stockpile had been handed over. So it obviously works when the credible threat of force is at least on the table. That affects the way that Russia and the Syrian regime think about things. So I'm talking about lifting the detainee issue to, a higher level, and people in the American administration could do that. They could talk about it high up in the American administration. They could say to the regime, release the children, otherwise we might do X or Y. But it's not for me to say, though.
Ambassador?
Yeah, I'm just going to say there are other specific things. I mean, there's a Caesar bill in Congress that passed unanimously in the House at the end of the last session, which would sanction. I mean, we there was good sanctions the other day, as we saw people involved in the chemical weapons center. But there are many other entities within the Syrian state and people that are supporting this government economically and allowing it to survive that could be sanctioned. It would be under the Caesar legislation. There's also, I think, that the point here, and certainly when you talk to like Mazen Hamada, who's become a good friend, he would describe how periodically there'd be releases from prison and they'd let out all the jihadis and they would keep the prisoners who were involved in the democratic movement inside. And there's this sort of argument, well, we need to ally ourselves with Assad because he's useful against ISIS. He's a disaster against ISIS. You know, he destroyed everything in the society that could have protected it from these kind of extremists. And so rejecting that approach and insisting that the future of Syria be one that's broadly representative of its population and that there has to be at least a pathway to justice. If there isn't, there's no possibility of the people who the representatives of the 11 million people who have been driven from their homes, or the 500,000 people who have been killed, can support a peace process.
And yet, the fact that ISIS and the al-Nusra Front are among those who are fighting the regime is a powerful argument that Assad uses, to maintain support among the Syrian people. Now, I want to ask the two Syrians here, no regime can sustain itself without some level of support from its population. And I was in Damascus in February, people were going about their business. If you went to some places, you would never know there was a war going on. You know, it's hard to talk to people one-on-one to get a real sense of what they're thinking, but they didn't look like people and seem like people who were strongly opposed to the government that was there. What is your sense, both Mahmoud and Qutaiba, of what level of support the Assad government still has inside Syria? And given that, what do you do about it?
I mean, I think the sentiment that no regime can stay without a support, I think Syria breaks that rule. Yes, definitely there are supporters, those who, live off the government, those who are part of the government, those who are part of the regime. We're not talking about only 2 people or 2 families who are part of the regime. We're talking about so many families and so many people benefiting. I'm just going to give you an example. My dad was a political activist in Syria since the 60s. He was one of the leaders of the nonviolent movement in Syria since 1963. My dad was detained 8 times between 1965 and 1979. And if you ask me until 2005 in my father's life, how many of those times I knew about? 0. My dad was too afraid to tell his kids about his activism, about what he used to do, about that he was even detained, because he was afraid that his kids are going to say the wrong thing is in front of the wrong person in the wrong time. And I mean, my dad was well known to be very well spoken against the government. So if this person was not able to tell his kids about his past because he was afraid they're going to say something, why would you imagine other people would be able to tell even foreigners or people they do not know about?
You think most Syrians don't know about what's going on in these prisons?
No, they absolutely do know. But what would they say? There is a reason why Syria was called the kingdom of silence. Because people cannot, and this is the thing, when we talk about why Assad is doing this thing, or why are they documenting? Because this is a systematic thing. For Assad, this is done for 3 reasons. Getting information might be one of them, but the main reason is basically to plant fear and to get revenge. This is a regime that really thinks that he needs to take revenge of every single person who actually even thought about revoluting against this regime. When we were being tortured, I mean, one of the main thing is those soldiers or those security persons would have is they would say, how did you have the courage even to go out? They were just totally shocked. Why would we have the courage to revolute against what they call God for them? For them, Assad is a God for them. And all of those basically who stood against Assad, at least by September 2011, there were at least 6 million out in the streets of Syria at one point, in so many points. So that for them, all of those people, they deserve to be punished. They deserve to be died. They deserve to be dead because they revolted against that person. And even when the government at some point, late 2012, early 2013, when they had so many numbers that, that Mahmoud was talking about, that there were people who would basically take shifts even to sleep, Assad, because they were not able to, to have a lot of people basically to torture all of those detainees, they would get someone, so they will have soldiers who are in jail basically because they're punished. They'll bring those soldiers and they will put them inside those cells, and they will assign them with torturing detainees while they're even inside the cells, because they do not have the time and they do not have the capacity basically to punish those people when they're out. And this is the fear when we talk also about the future or about this is happening now. We talk a lot about, a ceasefire or a peace settlement or all of those plans. But even when that happens, the Syrian regime and the Syrian government are not going to stop doing what they're doing inside prisons. Because inside their minds, they need to take revenge of whatever, whoever, they can get revenge of. And this is why they used chemical weapons in Khan Sheikhoun. They saw actually a chance for them to take revenge from those people who revolted against them. And they thought the international community is not going to react, so they did it.
We do have time for some questions, so if anybody does, please go to one of the two mics, and got somebody already.
Hi, my name is Ibrahim Al-Asil. I'm a Syrian analyst and activist. I have a short question, but before that, I also have a short comment about your question, Michael, about why the regime tortures Syrians. When you asked that question, I remember George Orwell's 1984 and the very last line of the novel when he says, talking about Winston, the protagonist of the novel, he loved Big Brother. And that guy was also tortured and he lost everything during the novel. And the last line was, he loved Big Brother. And I think that's why the regime tortures Syrians, because he wants to break them. And my question to my friend Qutayba and Muhammad, what do you do to stay alive from inside after all that experience that you went? And how do you keep your hope alive to continue doing what you're doing? Thank you.
Thank you. There is in this hell I have described, there is a golden rule. When you lose the hope, you are done. Yes, I felt for moments, actually everybody there would, we would have times when the 120 men would go together. Oh, we wish death now. Yes, I had these moments, of course, because these kind of hell, you wish the death every moment because you feel it every moment. So you arrive for this level, oh, I just want to be comfortable. I just want to rest in peace. I don't know if I can call it like this, it's really kind of Holocaust. So, to stay alive, you have to think that still alive outside this place. As a writer, in my first days, yes, I was so broke, and I start feel hallucinations, and because I wasn't eating even this terrible food they give us, I can't sleep. So, but in a moment, I felt like, no, I have to get out from here. I have to go out to write about these people. This is what pushes me to live, I think, to resist for live. So writing for me was kind of survival mechanism. This is way, and everyone has his way.
I think in a way being inside, you reach the bottom of everything. Like there is nothing lower than this. I mean, like, there were a lot of moments, but yeah, I mean, as a religious person, I remember, like, being inside. And you know, when you talk, like when you're religious and you talk to God, you always like, look at the sky. You imagine that, God is, somewhere up there. And I remember being in there, I felt, no, just God is next to me, and that every moment was basically the last moment of my life. So being out, although, there is a certain feeling after being, especially with both like the physical and the psychological torture, there is kind of like, I feel each one of us has kind of like a dead part inside that is still locked in there inside prison. And basically everything you do after is basically is just to try to release that part that is still inside. By helping those people who are still inside, by putting more spotlight on what is happening, by letting the world know, by stopping this is how we get our souls released. And as long as this is still happening, we still have our souls locked in there. So the hope is one day this can stop, and then we don't have to dream about it, we don't have to think about it, we don't have to wish to hear something from our friends or family who are still inside. We don't have to break down every time we see the pictures of our beloved ones in Caesar's photos, who we don't know where they're held. I guess we're just, in a way, we're just living and doing this, yes, as I said, just to release our souls that are still inside. That's where hope is coming from.
But just, I want to add, also, it's kind of luck always. I would just speak about small accident. In my 2 hours, in my first 2 hours, another detained person, he asked the guard for something. I don't remember exactly. So the guard was like so angry in that moment, and his head was so close to the corner between 2 walls, and he would just boom. And he's under 18. That guy was like 17, and he died. So his luck. I don't want just to. Also me, why I say frequently luck. For example, my dad, when he saw me at first, he barely knew me. He was like crying, seeing his son with like 60 pounds, with all of these infections in all of my body, with all of these broke bones, many things. Anyway, so he was like crying, and the doctors came to my dad. One of them told him, yes, you have to cry. You have to cry from happiness, because I think 3 days more, you will never see your son again.
We have some more questions? Over here.
Just wanted to thank you for coming and for the work you've been all doing and for telling your story. And I know how incredibly hard it is. I've been sitting here and it's been extremely hard to listen to, but I'm happy that I came to hear it. My name is Jackie. I run an organization called Sephardic Jews in DC. A lot of us are the grandchildren or children of Jews from Arab lands originally. We try to do different things to spread awareness, but I'd love to hear from you all. What can we be doing as young professionals, especially those of Arab Jewish descent, to help your cause, to spread awareness, to raise money? What could we be doing?
You want to take that?
Usually, this is the hardest question for us. I think there is the first step, always by working on such issues, is basically to spread awareness, to let people know. It's really outrageous. Especially being in there, it's really outrageous. First, knowing that people would not know, but the second thing, it really hurts when you know that people know and then there's nothing happening. That basically you have all of that evidence and all of that media out there, but there is no, basically there's no political will to do anything, and this is our problem with the government. And the lack of political will because there is no public pressure about it, because ordinary people don't know much about it. And this is, I think, if there is something that we need to do, and that's anything, can start with, and that's how you get people engaged, is when they know about a subject. And once they know, I think people can really, they always look for the path of how they're self-motivated to find the path to do something. But when people don't know much about about a cause, and you try to tell them, like, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this, usually they're lost. And this is, the thing, you can talk with someone when they have no information. They might be really, nice about it, and they're like really, affected by it. But the moment you leave them, as long as they don't really have much about it, it's gone. So really delivering the message, telling them what's going on. And the important thing about even the film, or especially about the film that Sarah made, this is not something that happened in the past. This is not something that only is happening now. This is something that is going to keep happening until we stop it. And it's going to be happening even more if we don't talk about it, if we don't raise awareness about it. So number one is just delivering the message out there, getting people engaged. And I think once you find that, of course, number one, talking to our representatives in the government, pushing them to do more about it. Ambassador Rapp talked about the Caesar bill that is already in the House. But once you get people engaged, there are a lot of paths open, I think.
Let's get a few more questions.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ahmad Bitar. I'm also a journalist, a Syrian journalist. I left Syria in 2013. Actually, I would like to salute you and give you kudos for all the horrible things that you have faced, and yet you are able to stay here and speak loudly about what's going on there. Actually, I was lucky enough to avoid that. Even I was a journalist, and I was also targeted by threats. Anyway, my question is, many people supporting the regime, are not supporting the regime, many people accepting the fact that al-Assad is still in power because they imagine that the horrible things will happen if he's gone by anyway, because of propaganda, because of what's happening in Iraq, Libya, Egypt, and the list goes on. So they are accepting the fact that it's better to have an Assad. It's the lesser of the two evils. So how we can reassure them that leaving, Assad leave the power, or being under justice with all those people who commit those crimes will not make the country much worse, because as he saw, people have almost a normal life. They are trying to act like normal, but they are imagine that Assad being gone, it will make even things worse. How we can reassure them that if their plan is there a vision that we can do, or at least can be done, so people can accept that if he's gone, things will become even better, and not kind of the movies when the villain is gone, the hero will kiss the heroine and everybody will be happy. Is there anything actual for real? Thank you.
Sarah, you want?
I really feel like that's a question for Syrians to answer. It's up to Syrians, the future of their country. It's not up to me.
Mahmoud?
I think, yeah.
I would like just to say one sentence. How could it be worse?
I think that goes back to the same thing about political will. Syrians who are under Syrian government control areas and who basically have no hope, for a replacement of Assad. Even us who are against Assad, yes. So far, yes, we don't have really any hope for what is going to come after Assad. And the reason behind that, because so far there's no political will from the international community to change Assad. So what is happening is not, when we compare between Assad and, for example, what is happening in areas out of Syrian government control, this is not really what is happening in in those areas is not really the replacement. This is the result of the international community not being engaged. This is the result of the chaos, basically, or not doing anything. And the replacement that once people in those areas see there is actually a political will, there is an engagement from the international community, they will have faith, as much as we will have also faith that something better is going to be coming. The problem is, I mean, as Mahmoud said, the problem right now with Assad is not about replacement. It's about that as long as this person in this regime is in power, the results are awful. That there are hundreds of thousands of people are just turning into monsters. That there's hundreds of thousands of people that are just being killed and tortured and all of that. And this is the problem. When it comes about the future, once you have political will and once it's out there, people will believe it, and people will be, okay, we will accept then the outcome that is going to come after Assad.
There is a very big difference between the support and the fear. What you have watched in Damascus is the fear. It's not the support. As he tried to tell you.
Right. We have time for one more question over here.
Hi, I'm Isa Al-Ghattas. I'm an advocate at Refugees International, so I work on refugee rights. My question is about the women who are held by the regime. Could you tell us a bit about the women who are detained and what they're facing if they're held in conditions that are in any way different from what you've described? Thanks.
The number of women is far fewer than the number of men, but they are also tortured, and we've heard many stories of women who've been raped in detention, and then, you know, then when they've been freed, in some cases their families have not wanted to then know them because it's so humiliating, you know, what's happened to them in detention. It's such a, you know, it has such a stigma. And, you know, I know about, you know, pregnant women who've been in detention, you know, given birth in detention, women with toddlers in detention. You know, Nicola and I have spoken to a lot of people who talked about, you know, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds in detention with them. You know, we spoke to women and we thought about interviewing one of the women. In the end, we didn't want to have too many people in the documentary because we wanted the characters of each person to come out and for people to focus. And, you know, predominantly it is men who are victims, you know, of this system. And, you know, and one of the things that, you know, the Commission for International Justice and Accountability, who were featured in the film, you know, has documented, and the Commission of Inquiry, is that there is a lot of sexual violence against men in detention. And so, you know, that's why we focused on men, but we've certainly spoken to a lot of women who had very upsetting stories. And, you know, many of the women didn't want to be filmed on camera. It's really, really hard for them, and it's, in a way, an even more hidden kind of world. But, yes, so I hope that
Just to
answers.
add one small thing about documenting, just so you have an idea. The process, basically, of documenting detainees, you're talking about families, a lot of them who are still in Syria, who will basically come voluntarily to human rights organizations and tell them, like, our son or our daughter is held by the Syrian government. Which is really, I mean, in the Syrian mentality, a lot of families, what they think, even my own family, they think, no, we don't want to talk to anyone. Hopefully our son would be released soon. So all of those cases documented, almost over 200,000 cases, those are the people, the families basically who had the courage to speak basically that, you know, about their family members that are being detained. Including, among those, there are 17,000 women who are documented. But the problem is, in most of the cases, I mean, I know a case I'm working on of even a Syrian American citizen, a 27 years old lady, basically, who's been detained for 1.5 years. She's been sentenced, you know, to be executed early this year, and her family till today fear to speak about her publicly so far, and they do not want. They only spoke with State Department and with officials, but they do not want to even talk with Human Rights Watch or like with any humanitarian organization. And this is a Syrian American citizen, basically. So imagine if those people have that fear, who kind of like have some kind of protection because they have the American citizenship. Imagine how the normal Syrians feel, about their beloved ones inside.
Unfortunately, our time is up. But Sarah, just very quickly, if people want others to see your film, where and how can they do so?
Well, we really would like a US broadcaster. So if anyone can get
broadcasters out there, please.
a US broadcaster,
listen.
we'd like that. But please, visit our website, syriasdisappeared.com. We put information about screenings on our website. People can do community screenings. So if you email me and you want to screen the film, we can give you a copy of the film, and quite a lot of people have done that already in the UK, and it was just shown in Italy as well, and we're really keen on these community screenings because I think it's a really good way of, having a conversation around the film, so you can also watch it like that. I hope that we can get it to the US on a broadcaster or on Netflix or somewhere where it will also be available individually. But please do get in touch with us if you would like to screen it in your community.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for making the film. Thank you, Qutaiba and Mahmoud, for sharing your terrible experiences, and Ambassador for your work, and for the Holocaust Museum for presenting this opportunity for people to see it.
Thank you for coming this evening. Please give our panelists a thank you.